I think it's that time. For what? Another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Welcome back. It's your host, Gautam Yegapin, alive and blessed to present you with today's conversation. Stay thirsty for knowledge, and I guess some water too. Season 12 is swimming. I'm excited for this next conversation. We have a very special guest with us. Today we're talking to Betsy Rymes. She is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania who studies how people use language in everyday life and how schools can better recognize, respect, and build upon students' linguistic resources. Drawing on sociolinguistics, discourse analysis, and linguistic anthropology, her work investigates how social interaction, institutions, and digital platforms influence how language is used, understood, and policed in educational contexts. Through her research and her blog, Citizen Sociolinguistics, she makes a powerful case for a more inclusive and reflective language education, one that invites students and teachers to notice how they talk, what their words mean, and how language reflects their identity, culture, and the world. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I couldn't have said it myself as well as you just did.
No, that's funny. If I have to say social linguistics one more time, my brain might fry. I was trying so hard to be like, say it right this time, say it right this time. It's so many letters.
I know, yeah, too many, but I
You
think you did a great job.
you get used to it after a certain amount of time?
Yeah. Some people just say socio. They don't even bother with the linguistics part.
That's funny. I mean, I was just telling you, I mean, it's been coming up, this particular theme has been coming up so much in my day-to-day life. We were just reading this book called A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami. And he's very, have you ever read him before?
Yes.
Yes.
Love it.
So he goes off on these random tangents. It's like reading like it's like you
Mhm.
never know when he's about to philosophically explore one thing, but in this last book, he started exploring names. And what he was kind of, in my opinion, what I understood from what he was saying was it's really fascinating to think about what gets a name and what doesn't. Why is it that some things have names, but then a lot of other things don't? And what is the relationship we create to something when we give it a name? And I want to first start there just because that was the first thing that came off that book. What do you think?
Oh, huge thing. I love thinking about names, and we have a lot of different names over the course of our lifetime, right? Nicknames, uh, maiden names. So beyond whatever our baptismal name is, we usually accumulate a lot of other names. But I think people usually think um, naming someone is a way of, knowing someone's name, their first name, calling them by their first name is like something you do when you're close to somebody. But I was just a lot of times it's more intimate to not call someone by their given name. Like uh, an example of this came up in my class last semester um, regarding kin terms. So, like cross-linguistically, people have very different um, sets of kin terms, like for their sisters and brothers, their aunts and uncles. Like a lot of times we have like in English, right? We don't have a superordinate term for aunt and uncle, like that includes uncles and aunts. We just have uncle or aunt and then aunt and uncle. Um, but other like Spanish, you have tío and tía and tíos. Tíos is inclusive of both of those. Okay, so other times of what I'm getting to the names thing because something came up in our class about in the Chinese language, there are a lot of different words for siblings and for aunts and uncles and for all kinds of kin. Um, so think of like you have a brother and a sister, maybe, and those are the two words you have in English to call them. Like my brother's named David. So I always call him David. I don't call him brother. That would seem kind of weird, right? In English. But in Chinese, there's not only a word for brother and sister, there's a word for older brother and younger brother, an older sister and younger sister. And you don't call, like, this is in an older generation, right? Because this generation doesn't have any brothers or sisters. But in an older generation, people wouldn't call their brother or sister um, by their name. They call them by their kin term. And
Mm.
it's much more intimate. You know, you calling your older brother, and you're calling your younger sister, and it's cute and sweet. And we think of that as like, oh, that's so different. But the same is true for mom and dad in English. We would never call, like, I would never call my mom Gretchen. It seems very distancing, right? To use her first name. So, and the same is true in Chinese families. It's kind of distancing to use the name of your brother instead of calling him older brother. So, this just to say, in terms of names, so they do so much social work. Like, and how they function depends so much on social context, right? Like, like sociocultural context, like what society you're in, but also just the moment. Like maybe you do want to call your mom Gretchen because she's pissing you off, you know, and you do want to use the more distancing term, or you think, I'm old now, I'm going to call her Gretchen, and that's going to show I'm mature. But so their names are cool.
I mean, fascinating. I mean, I feel like a lot of what you're saying is so interesting because it's not clear why that subtle shift does do something different in your mind. Because let's say, for example, like, I mean, in my culture, I speak Tamil, and we have very specific words for like dad's older brother's wife. There's like a very specific term that you only use for them. And if you have a younger brother's wife, you call it different. There's no, it's not just like aunt or uncle, so it's not generic like that either.
Mhm.
And I like, I mean, it's so interesting because even with the brother and sister thing, again, older brother, you have particular words for, younger brother, you have a different word for, and you only really call them by that for respect or whatever. And there is some sort of like tenderness that comes when you do call them that. But let's say you live in a culture where you never knew that that was an option or you never knew that was a possibility. It's weird that it still feels that when you call somebody just by their public name, maybe you still don't get that little thing in your brain. So, what do you think it is that's fundamentally happening there? That's not just your perception of it. It seems something that is maybe just naturally stored in your brain or something.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think like I'm not, obviously, I'm not like a neuroscientist. I tend to think about things more from a sociocultural perspective. And um, I feel like each of these, any word, any a kin term or a name or the language, the word choice we make, it's just an accumulation of layers of our experience in the world. So I guess that gets layered in your brain, but and it's super dynamic though. It's not like it gets set in your brain like, oh, okay, I'm a Tamil speaker. Now this is like ingrained in my brain as something that I'm going to be sensitive to. But you do have like experience after experience after experience of using it in a more intimate way or a person of it gains connections to family resonances. So you have like a personal archive of times that you've used that word and people you've used it with, and all those like um, layers of meaning are packaged into that word when then you use it again. And then you build it, but each time you have an interaction with other people, it has potential to shift a little bit, right? So it might seem kind of weird to use a new word for something the first time, but then we're always crossing borders, talking to new people, experiencing things in new ways. There's so many like variables involved in each interaction that um, you keep building the archive of what that word means in your world and with different people. I think this is like one of the things that makes sociolinguistics so interesting.
Hmm. I mean, before we continue, I just need to know. I usually start with the origin story, but I this time was just so. We just finished that book yesterday, so I was like, I really
Oh,
wanted to hear your thoughts. But I would love to know how you kind of became fascinated with. I was just talking to a friend yesterday. Social linguistics feels like an abstracted layer above any one particular language itself. It's not just about English. It's not just about Spanish or French or Tamil. It's it's understanding language at a more abstract level in general. So how did you become fascinated by that abstraction piece?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I would resist the term abstract. I would say it's like probably the most concrete um, way of looking at language because it's about how situated language use is. But that's very generalizable, right? It's like a primordial condition. Everybody is born and they need to communicate and they start figuring out in a society how they're going to do it. So, um, and in a society, they're going to learn to do it in very distinct ways. Um, so I think maybe so how did I get interested in sociolinguistics? Um, yeah, I guess that comes down to I mean, I'm not a linguist. I like want to say that straight up. I'm not a linguist in the traditional sense at all. I feel like I'm more um, uh, aligned with linguistic anthropology disciplinarily, but I feel like there's got to be some uh, and that I say that just to say that linguistics traditionally is a much more abstract endeavor. Uh, like even originally, completely theoretical endeavor. I don't know if this is a little bit of a boring tangent, but like,
No, no, there's no
yeah,
such thing as boring.
yeah, yeah, um, like there's this idea of langue and parole, like langue being language, you know, the as a structural phenomenon, and parole being the way we use language out in the real world. So some linguists would like to see the discipline of linguistics as just focused on language as an abstract concept, like uh, you know, how do we speak grammatically? How do we do it? Let's look at the structure of language to figure that out. Pull it out of all context and figure out uh, like how we as people learn to speak grammatically. How do we do it? Like it seems like it might be a completely abstract phenomenon that's based on, like Chomsky would say, your language acquisition device in your lodged in your brain. But I think um, today people have a much more robust understanding of what it means to study um, linguistics and that it you can't abstract it from social interaction. And there are quite a few um, ways that's true. And but I think sociolinguistics makes it explicit that you have to look at language and social context. And that's what I've always been interested in. I got interested in language because I mean, I was an English major, right? I like literature and I love like I'm kind of like you. I like seeing what say reading a book brings out in people and like the idea that you can read a book together and have a discussion about it and look at the language and see how even distinct language brings out different ideas. I love that. So I always thought, oh, it would be nice to have my life devoted to just like having that with people. And so that makes teaching seem like a great idea. But um, I had a counterposed idea, which is I'd like to do something that really seems to have a good impact on the world. Yeah, like that is, in addition to engaging with people and enjoying my own life and feeling like I'm inspiring other people into this, like the same type of thing that I like to do. I think it's also there's so many people who have very concrete needs. And so after I graduated from college as an English major with no real marketable skills, I thought, oh, maybe I can at least teach English, right? There's so many people in the United States who need to learn English to do their job. So and also I moved to Los Angeles for fun. And I thought, there's so many people here. I could really help the world by teaching English. So then I realized, what am I talking about? There's no such, it's such, so as soon as I started teaching ESL in a junior high in Los Angeles, I realized these kids are not learning English from me. They're learning it from all their peers at this school. The way they're speaking doesn't sound like a white Midwesterner. It sounds like an African American from South Central Los Angeles. And that's the language that they need to get along in the world. So I started feeling increasingly limited in what I could offer to the world as somebody who, you know, if my main thing is teaching English, I'm not really necessary. But there's something else going on. Um, and I think this is, I know one of the things that I realized sort of like maybe the ideological underpinnings of my own thing. Like, I know one of the questions you were sort of thinking about is what um, what are some circulating like language ideologies out there? And there's some pretty powerful ones that we don't even really consciously think about. And one is monolingual language ideology, like this idea that, oh, English, which I was embodying as somebody coming to teach English and help save people. I think English, the idea that, oh, in fact, in this country now, we have one um, official language. Our president has decreed English as the official language of the United States. And there's a lot of language in that decree that says this will make for a unified nation. Now, obviously, that's not true. If you just look at current events, um, that really isn't helping that. And and also, just knowing English is not going to help anybody get ahead if they're already discriminated against because they're poor or they're racially discriminated against, or people see them as an immigrant. Speaking perfect English isn't going to help them. uh, Necessarily. There are many ways they can get discriminated against anyway. So, okay, back to um, so people have this monolingual ideology, but that gets layered onto, as an English teacher, that gets layered onto standard language ideology, which is this idea that not only could English be the one thing you need to know, also there's a standard way of speaking English that you have to learn, right? Like, so standard language ideology is this idea that there's one form of English that's more useful in society than others, and that's actually superior. And teachers have completely internalized this. Most English teachers have internalized this idea, like it's my job to get students to know the type of English that's going to help them in society. So this is anywhere you look, this standard language ideology is contradicted in people's experience. But I think it took me some time to kind of bust out of that uh, and realize that a there are so many different forms of English that kids are learning, and they need them all. And also, were coming into my class speaking Spanish, which I needed to learn. So, multilingualism and speaking multiple forms of English and Spanish and other languages are all resources that are important, for a kid growing up anywhere in the world these days. So, okay,
Yeah.
so sociolinguistics is about like how do all those language resources function? in distinct situations. Like, and that is like something everybody on the planet, you, me, anybody experiences every day, the way how you throw out some language, a kin term or a name, or, you say something like, where's the game at? Or something instead of where's the game? And suddenly you're shaken up. You're participating in different ways depending on how you use that language. And like that's really powerful, I feel like. So that I feel like is what the role of a language teacher should be more focused on, not my naive idea that I could just impart English to people and they would be empowered when I first started
Hmm.
teaching.
I mean, I feel like what I'm hearing you say in a lot of ways is, and it's just been so fascinating because I, for the most of my life, hated reading. I did not like quote unquote English, whatever that meant,
Yeah,
which meant performing it at school. But then something changed. I started reading philosophy. I fell in love with poetry. I fell in love with literature, and then I fell in love with the essence of language itself. And I feel like my passion for it naturally grew, where earlier when it was attempted to have imposed all the rules and regulations, it actually felt so constricting. And I feel like what I'm hearing you say a lot of is social linguistics feels like a much more personable approach to teaching language because language is not something that exists outside of you. English isn't out there and you need to go reach for it and then be perfect at it. It is also in some language in general is also within you. It is the way you not only just navigate the world, but understand the world. And it's like, it is deeply personal and to remove the person from it, I think actually does a huge disservice to really making someone feel connected to the thing that literally connects them to others and the world.
totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking too, what you're saying is also everybody's doing it all the time. So like it's deeply personal and we are really good at knowing like the types of language that resonate with us. Like you're saying, if some, we all have a lot of expertise in the way we use language. So it's very strange to go into, say, like you're saying, when you start, you used to hate English because you go into class and the expectation is that you know nothing and you need to learn these rules and regulations for using it properly, as opposed to going into class and saying like, okay, tell me what English you know. Like, let's talk about it. Or what other languages do you know? How can we build on that? Or let's compare and contrast. Or even, you know, you say like you're in English class. When do you use English? Maybe online, texting, uh, maybe you have a podcast, like, and you're using English all the time. Like all these ways that people are using language and maybe mixing languages. Like these days on social media, there's so many forms of language, so many languages that kids are using at the same time. And those are things that a teacher could build on instead of imposing an idea. I think that's the inquiry stance that you seem to like fully engage with. Like, how do you pique people's curiosity rather than convince them that there's something they don't know that they need to get?
Yeah. And I was talking to a friend about this earlier, and I'm really curious what you think about this because I think this is a core of pretty much every subject. I was talking to a bureaucrat in education a while back, and she was talking about mathematics, and she hadn't studied a lot of math before, and so the way she was talking about math was actually very cut and dry. It was like something that was a bunch of formulas to memorize. That's it. But after studying math and the kind of beauty behind it, I feel like what has become clear to me is there is a distinction between the practice of something and the actual philosophy behind the thing itself, the theories behind it, and usually that's what makes something so magical because the philosophy of math is something that is deeply personal to each individual. So asking questions like, how do you determine what is true? That is not something that only one person does. Everyone does that, right? When you're provided with some information, how do you know what is and isn't true? Like, and math does a phenomenal job of really contending with that question. I feel like same with English. What we're talking about here is this separation where there's like the practice of English, which is can you get your grammar right? Do you know when to use a semicolon and a colon? And but then there's also the kind of the whole artistic world behind it too, which is so much more beautiful and enriching. And so why do you feel like this split maybe has happened? And why do we only focus on the practice of these things and we've lost kind of the focus on the I don't know, the much deeper questions in each one of these fields?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I have some theories, but I mean, I think I really like what you're getting at. There's a big existential difference between just like memorizing something and really understanding something and living it. And I mean, in language, I don't know about math. Like, I don't think I've ever felt like I'm really living math, but I do. I, maybe you do feel like you live it. Like, uh, but and that's a beautiful thing. But I feel like the other day I overheard someone asking her class, like, think of something that you memorized in the course of your life, something that or your education, something that you memorized but you didn't understand. And uh, and I thought that was such a great question. Like, write it down and think about like how is that different from other forms of learning? And it's to me it in for math immediately comes to mind like, oh, the I don't know why pi r squared is like the air. I don't know. Is that a
Yeah,
formula?
the area, yeah, it's
Area
the
of a
area of the
circle?
circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, pi is so weird. I don't know what that is, but I did
Yeah.
memorize that. But it didn't. I don't feel like. I mean, if I thought about it for a while, maybe I could get a
I
real.
mean, it's fascinating, huh?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah,
truly, I mean, tr
yeah,
at its core, it's so fascinating. But I'm sorry, I just had to hop in because like the main thing is, but you have to ask why, you know? And I feel like that question is
yeah,
sometimes so squashed because it's like because either I said so or because that's what you need to know. Like, there's no, I mean, truly, why is pie is so fascinating. It's not trivial at all. It's actually quite
yeah.
insane.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot like people figured it out. Like it's incredible the mind. I think what you're getting at too is just I mean I love the thing about asking why and not knowing the answer and this is part of like the most fun aspects of teaching, right? To be able to like and it happens with language all the time. If like oh go out there, like interview people like about grammaticality judgments or something. If you interview like 15 people about whether it's okay to say something like, uh, where's the game at? You'll probably maybe half the people will, if you say, is this okay? Is it not okay? Or does it depend on the situation? Some people will say it's not okay. Some people will say it depends on the situation. Some people will say, yeah, that's fine, whatever. So if you compile a bunch of answers like in a class, then you can say like, why are we getting all kinds of different answers for this? Like, why do different people say different things? What more do we need to know? Like, who are the people who said it depends? Who are the people who said maybe those are the like let's go back and see what kind of more questions we need to ask about this. So the main thing isn't to decide what is the right way to say that, to ask that question, where's the game at, but to understand why. Why do people give different answers? Like, and even if you ask ChatGPT, they're going to say it depends. They don't know, and they're obsequious, right? So they're not going to rain on anybody's parade. So but why do you get all these different answers? And then that's the beauty. You can ask students and then they can start exploring. And then they can make decisions for themselves about how they want to speak in different contexts to different people. Like, okay, I can say, where's the game at to somebody, and I'm going to say, where's the game to somebody else. And I
Mm,
know why I'm making that decision. It's like, um, and both are functional in different ways in different situations. Um, so I feel like asking why is the crucial question for language. And
yeah.
who and what, like learning about the all the social variables that go into anything you say and the kind of impact it's going to have.
So I feel like I strongly just agree with everything you're saying, just in the sense of I find it to be so much more personal, and it's not some, as we mentioned earlier, rules that you need to memorize to some extent. How would you say, so we were talking about ideologies in education. How do you feel like the current dominant ideology in the way that we approach learning English? Could you maybe like highlight first what that is, maybe where it came from? Why is it that we learn it in the way that we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it are these two dominant language ideologies, standard language ideology and monolingual language ideology. The idea that there's one standard that's better than others and and that monolingualism is better than multilingualism and that there's even such a thing as monolingualism. Like these are ideologies that people hold deeply, and also they're connected to, I guess, the project of sorting people. I mean, uh, once you decide what the right way to say something is, you can say, you can test it and you can categorize people in terms of people who speak this way and people who don't. People who speak this way will get put them into like an honors class. People who don't put them in the remedial class. So, but the important thing is the standard language ideology suggests, or it's based on an assumption that there's a real difference um, in quality between those two ways of speaking or ways of using language. And that's not necessarily it doesn't inhere in the language, it inheres in the society that is doing this sorting. So for so if you take a different approach, if you say like, oh, I don't want to sort the kids into honors, uh, you know, intermediate and remedial. I want to learn about these kids and what they know and how we can build on that. I want to hear the kinds of knowledge these kids have and how they can learn from each other. Then these standard language distinctions don't really matter anymore. So if you go um, if you go if you ask, for example, a class to, let's say, oh, let's think about how language works. Let's think about how the language generates new words. Oh, there's so many ways that it happens, right? Sometimes there's like mm, portmanteau words like mansplain, or there are like suffixes, affixes that you can add on to words, or there's borrowings from different languages. This is kind of cool. Like, what about you guys? Do you have any kind of weird words that you use that aren't in the dictionary? Like, name one. There are zillions, right? Kids, as soon as they start brainstorming, they're going to come up with a lot of different words. Like, um, and they might be like a word like googlear, like to Google in Spanish. Googlear. It's or some last semester students in my class came up mentioned a word shuangqiu, which is a combination of a Chinese character and the letter Q to say thank you in a sarcastic way. So you can have students compiling
Wow.
yeah, isn't it cool? And we started saying schwanku all the time in my class when I'd say like, No, that's due tomorrow. Oh, schwanku. Like, so, so if you build like a dictionary of words like this in a class, you suddenly realize, oh, everybody has knowledge. And we're also learning about how language functions. So I feel like and it also exposes the pointlessness of just dictating one form of language. And then you can have the why discussion, like why do you guys use all these different words? Why do we have googlyar, schwanku, mansplain? What are these things doing in our social lives? Like
Yeah.
and yeah, and so it's language itself is like a mega inquiry project that you can do every day on your own.
Which is amazing. And honestly, I feel like you had a throwaway line in there that I actually think is so profound where you were like the language itself doesn't do the separating like the schools do, which are like the structures that you build
Yeah.
around it. I mean, I think that's actually so profound because when we think about what it means to be quote unquote good at English, for example, the example you just gave right now is almost never taken into consideration of like how adept are you at fitting into modern day slang? So for example, I am not I haven't been really on TikTok or social media for quite some time. And I feel like while that had a lot of benefits, one of the huge disadvantages was that I didn't know the language to really talk to my own peers, where I didn't know all the words, I didn't know the references. So it doesn't matter if you can like read Shakespeare, but then you can't fit in with your own peers. Like it just doesn't like a huge part of language is also your ability to like kind of be this move like a fluid force between all types of different environments, knowing what to say, what not to say, when to say it, how to say it, who to say it to. And so it's
Yeah.
not just about like I've mastered the old form of, that it's maybe that's one use case. I mean, there's also nothing wrong with that too, but it feels like that kind of rigidity around language is actually so sad because it's so much more.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Like father of sociolinguistics, Bill Labov would call, he had a word for like uh African American kids in Philly that didn't speak like uh the way their neighbors did, that tried to speak proper all the time. Like the other kids called them lames. They were lame. Lames. And they're ostracized by their peers, right? Because they're speaking too proper. So, um, so yeah, a good case in point of like kind of what you're talking about. You're being a lame if you don't know like weird TikTok lingo, but not really. I mean, it's okay. But I think a really another like useful distinction here is maybe it's like a three-way distinction. There's standardization is a form of prescriptivism, right? Being prescribing what the right and wrong ways are to use language. And linguists like Bill Labov, sociolinguists, kind of opened up the way people think about language pedagogically by saying like, oh, we're being descriptivists. Like we're just describing what we see around us. So, oh, we see people using TikTok, they use language this way. We see people in this neighborhood speak this way. People in South Philly, they say Passyunk Avenue instead of Passyunk Avenue. Like we're describing what these people do. So they're saying we're not making any judgments. We're just describing this is African American vernacular English. It has these patterns. This is um, standardized forms of English. It has this patterns we're describing. And that's useful to a degree, but just describing isn't really enough, right? Because it doesn't get at the why and what are the consequences. So that's where I think criticality comes in. Critical language awareness, being aware both of prescriptive versions of descriptions of different ways of language functions, and then also being able to critically decide when you want to use different forms. Like, so that, like, instilling critical language awareness, I feel like is really what the job of education, language education is. It's not
Hmm.
prescribing something or even describing things. It's more complex than that. It's creating critically aware students who can make choices for themselves.
Yeah. So how does one, so how, in if you were in an ideal world to redesign, you have 12 years of public education to work with. And I think I don't know. I sometimes think back to there's a few times I'm in classrooms or I'm around kids who are, 5 or 6 where they're learning, their phonics again and they're learning how to like write each letter and I'm like, wow, even I mean that part to me is the most difficult, fascinating part. And then I feel like in from at least what I've seen, it looks like they're doing it great because everyone does learn how to read and write somehow. And so I'm like, that somehow is working. But then after which is where you get into literature. I think that part can be really amended well. But what are your thoughts? Can this be talked about from 5 and 6?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kids see things going on all around them. I mean, even like speech acts, right? Like, um, so how do you greet people? Like, how do you greet your mom? How do you greet the teacher? How do you greet your friends? Like, kids can talk about that and think through what are the different meanings of those different ways of saying hello or hi mom. What kinds of names do you use? Like nicknames, given names, kin term names, like, oh, or do you say like Mrs. Johnson or Teacher Johnson or Teacher Ann or like and like I feel like those are ways kids can get sort of take on from a very early age the stance of being critically aware of language around them. They like it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so yeah, I mean, I guess coming back to that question of like, if you could generalize, like, what are some things, maybe some questions, how would you maybe
Oh,
change the curriculum for what it is now?
oh, yeah. I mean, who knows what the curriculum is now, but I mean, I feel like I'm not, I can only speak to my tiny um, area where I feel like I have experience in terms of if I'm going to prescribe curriculum, I feel like um, in general, an inquiry approach is the best approach. So you want kids to generate questions that they think are interesting. You want kids to give them the tools to explore those questions. Um, and in terms of language, kids learn, like you said, kids learn language no matter what. So help them see, like, um, help them become, I guess, lifelong learners would be the goal. And but I want to add one other thing. I'm not giving specific curriculum ideas at this, obviously, but I do feel like there are many, 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 many things like you could do in a language arts class day after day that builds critical language awareness and curiosity in people um, and gets them into learning literature, wanting to read more, wanting to know more, and know more about multiple languages. But I think maybe another crucial thing that's more important even than that is um, learning how, like, to approach like the other. Like, and when we separate people into different tracks, or we're saying some people are smart, some people are dumb, they're not learning that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, so having a, a humble and generous approach to knowledge and what counts as knowledge is really crucial for a teacher and to get their students um, to convey that to students to look at the world around them and see people be able to engage with people who are other who speak in a different way, who maybe speak a different language, look different, like that to be respectful, and know that there's a lot to learn from those people is like, I think, the highest goal of education. Like,
I mean, that's such a huge fundamental distinction. And I think like I really like how, I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot recently too, of just like how the high school that I went to was extremely diverse, just in terms of like, I think 80% of the students were children of immigrants and immigrants from all over the world. And so the kind of backgrounds that people in the classrooms came from were just so different. And so, but what ended up happening is similar to what you said, where there was just such the separation at such a high degree happened, where you would often just be in classes with people who had similar resources to you or something along those lines. And so you never had the space to really hear the stories of like difference. And it became kind of like a social hierarchy that's built on like who's in what classes and who's not in what classes. And it turns into something completely different where there was the opportunity to truly just like have some of these other conversations really about like how does language find you and how do you find, how do you understand the world through language?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's huge. And I feel like and those experiences are really educational if you I guess one place where I feel schools are still they still have like a degree of freedom to be to pursue all these things we're talking about, despite the more rigid structures of achievement that and the pressures associated with those, is like classes for English learners, like ESL classes, TESOL classes. Those classes are to some degree free from a lot of the constraints uh, of, like AP English or honors English or 10th grade language arts. If you're in an ESL class, your job is to explore language. Sadly, and so I feel like that's a case in a school like you're talking about, or there's a neighborhood near here, Upper Darby, that's massively multilingual, and the people from all over the world, like in a single ESL class, there might be people from speaking like 10 different languages. And I feel like, especially in a class like that, you have an opportunity to, to teach students to be open to each other. And um, but it would be even better if those students were around everybody else, like because there's so much to learn from each other. Uh, yeah, but I mean, I don't have any other solutions for like how to solve like competitiveness and like
Yeah.
and just the anxiety and fear that everybody's parents have about whether their kids are going to be like high achieving and I guess like, but no matter what, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I teach at University of Pennsylvania and surrounded by kids who have been programmed to get into this university, and um, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're fully developed humans when they get here. There are a lot of people walking on the street, who maybe dropped out of high school, who have a much more sophisticated approach to everyday life than these students do. Um, so it's like, how do you get those worlds talking to each
Mm,
other?
that is the real question, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it connects kind of back to what we were saying earlier when you like remove the kind of I'm using the word philosophy very loosely here, but when you remove the philosophical thinking from the practice, and I feel like schooling itself has had this, not just in each individual class, but now the system of schooling is kind of this game to now beat. And people learn how to play the game so well that they forget to ask the fundamental questions of like, what do I even really want to do with like truly, not just what job do I want to do, but who do I want to be? Like what is it that I care for? What does this existence mean? Like the real questions that I feel like any proper education should also, I'm not saying that's all it should help you do, but it should also help you contend with those really
Yeah.
important questions of your mortality. But it's like those have been completely, I don't, I didn't talk about death until I was 21 in a philosophy class. Until then, I didn't even know I was gonna die. I did not know that. It was never talked about. I mean, to me, that blows my mind that in 18 years, until I was 18, not one person thought it would be useful to maybe talk about the fact that I'm gonna die. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, how is that possible? Yeah, there's so many like big holes in people's education in that way though. I mean, I guess that's what like re-educated is about. Is like, oh, how can we re-educate ourselves so that we like have that like more that we cover some of the like really existentially important things. Yeah, yeah. But I think also, I mean, a boring question is like people are there's so many people in the world now. And so many of the really unfortunate things that happen in education, I think, are just because of they're just like economies of scale.
The scale, yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Yeah.
Like even admissions into even an Ivy League school that's so much of it is automated now. You know, like figuring out who should be admitted. It's because there's so many people. Like so I mean it's a good that elite institutions or opportunities for learning are available to a lot more people now. I mean that maybe this thing you're talking about like really thinking about philosophical problems, understanding what they mean for us in our lived experience, that's like a very privileged form of being educated, and it's wonderful. And it used to be like like reserved for a few privileged people who got to go to great schools. Now we're trying to open up those schools, and so, but how do we also open up that type of deep learning to everybody instead of just making it um, available to everybody, but now it's more assembly line like that's
Yeah.
not that's not a that's not opening things up.
100%. And I feel like, and to maybe even expand that, I feel that some of those concepts don't actually have to be taught through school at all. I mean,
Yeah.
because what's really interesting is I feel like what taught me, I used to learn classical South Indian singing called Carnatic music. And um, most of the things that I learned was actually through that. While like had nothing to do with a philosophy classroom or anything. And I feel like in
Mm.
that sense, when there are other establishments of like exit like that, do teaching or even apprenticeships or something that really contend with these questions, it doesn't, school can just be something that maybe amplifies that or something that teaches you the tools to really work through those, but it doesn't. But then now these institutions have also started feeding into, okay, if I go to this, then how do I use this extracurricular to get into Stanford? So
I know.
everyone, so I feel like it didn't have to be reliant on the school, but it feels like now schools are so central to so much of how society itself is structured that it plays a central role of what it values is what everyone values. And so if it doesn't place value on philosophical thinking, then no one does, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's rough. I mean, I think what like that idea of sustained deep learning is really important. But I think maybe one thing that the schools and institutionalized education can offer is like a community where people come and like we can't have a world full of like autodidacts who are learning this and that all over the place. I mean, that's just the internet. Um, we need to like have a place where people bring whatever they're getting out there into a shared space and talk about it. And that is super powerful. Like so I have a virtual linguistic ethnography lab that I run with my master's students. And in that, like week by week, they have to collect online, like observations that they've made during the week. Like, and each week it'll be something different. Like, oh, what about ways of doing routines? Like, go this week, when you're out doing your daily round, see how people like do service encounters, how people get on and off the bus, what they say. How do people greet each other in Philly? Like, I mean, there's some pretty interesting patterns out there. And just, or how do people greet each other online? Notice all these routines. What are your routines that you do on social media?
Mm,
And then, so like, class of 25, they'll post all this stuff on our website, the Virtual Linguistic Ethnography Lab, and then they'll see each other's. So then we come to class and I'm like, okay, which posts were interesting to you? Like which what like and certain people will comment on certain ones that are like, oh my God, that's so true. And we'll learn like new um or certain things usually we'll come up with. I mean, so then we get to the why questions, like why is getting on and off the bus in Philadelphia so weird? Like, and then,
mm,
like people always have these like weird interactions, and then we talk about it, and we're like, okay, the rule is, in Philadelphia, there are no, the routine is there's no routine, or something like that, or um, what what actually does everybody in Philadelphia says like go birds, go birds. It's our football team, right? The Eagles. How does that actually function out there? Everybody's either greeting as goodbye, as like it can do so many things. And then students who are not from here, they suddenly see it all around them. Oh my God, yeah, everybody's saying go birds. What the heck?
that's so fascinating. Is there another team with birds there? Why don't they just say go Eagles?
It's insider knowledge. I guess it's just, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of,
that's
I guess
cool.
probably somebody coined it at one time and then somebody thought it was cool and then everybody started saying it. Yeah, that's a good
So
question
cool.
though. Yeah, go birds. It sounds cooler to say that than go Eagles. Like it makes you sound like an outsider if you say go Eagles. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I had no idea. I have not spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, even though I lived in DC for a long time, but I would love to. I don't even think, I think I've driven by it once, but I would love to spend more time there.
Oh, it's a great city. Beautiful. Right now it's really cold, but it is a great city. Great people. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
But cool.
So
But
anyway, I went on that long tangent about the linguistic ethnography lab because I feel like a lot of times they bring in things that they've been doing for years, like, oh, mixing multiple languages on their social media sites, and then they bring it in and we talk about it and it makes sense to people. I mean, you start becoming more mindful of how you're interacting with different people in the world. And also people learn about each other. If people from around the world in that class learn about different forms of social media use. So they kind of bust out of their bubbles and talk about it. Um, even yeah, so many interesting
yeah.
things come out of that.
So language is used there as a means of connection rather than like separation in a lot of ways, which is I
Yeah.
feel like one of the main things I want to really highlight for myself and just moving forward, really thinking about language. Yeah, thinking about this like standard ideology, a standardization ideology around language specifically, which when the way you've mentioned it and talked about it, it seems like I understand the essence of why you would have something like that. But when that becomes the core focus, it actually takes away from all these other amazing opportunities to relate and connect to language in a way that you can't when there's like one standard that you must aim for.
Yeah, and usually there's no right answer. I mean, this was a strange thing about being an ESL teacher too, which I taught junior high and adult ESL learners when I lived in LA, is like they'll come to you with questions like, and there's no, is it, I heard someone say gonna. Should I say gonna or going to? And it's like, who am I to say like, oh, it's going to? No, that's not right. Maybe standard language ideology would say going to, but nobody says that. Everybody says gonna. Like everybody. So who are you to be the arbiter of what is or is not said? It's just like
Mm,
it's awkward and it's like you're lying, right? You're lying when you say there's one right way.
dang. I mean, this was, I think, such a lovely conversation, and I feel like just a good reminder of the things that we fundamentally take for granted. You can always rethink and kind of reconsider what some of these foundations of language are. But I want to say thank you so much for all your insights. This was a lovely conversation.
Oh, I had a blast. I mean, I could babble on for hours. You're so fun to talk to. Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. But yeah, I mean, I want to say thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Season 12 is well on its way. We will be taking a break for the weekend, but I'll see you next week. And as per usual, stay re educated.